Hello, Harvey. Welcome to the European Tech Show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you building something that is so cool. Before we get into it, can you just give me a quick 1-minute pitch into you and what you're building?
Sure. Yeah. So I run Rivan. We're a synthetic fuel manufacturer. So our aim is basically to create the cheapest synthetic fuels in the world. And what that really means is we have a direct air capture product, we have an electrolyzer product, and we have a reactor product. We vertically integrate all of the engineering here in the UK, all the way through from sunlight on one side of the process, all the way through to a synthetic fuel on the other. And we're hoping to basically capture vast amounts of carbon and drive the cost of capturing carbon down.
Very cool. Before we get into what you're building, what kind of stage of development you're at, I actually wanted to ask a quick question about your background. You are building in a very technical space. I read one of your blog posts and it was very scientific, very deep. I don't know if you call it deep tech, scientific, but your background, professional footballer turned twice successful SaaS entrepreneur. How did you get into this space, or why this space specifically?
Yeah, thanks for reading the blog.
It was tough. I'm not going to lie, it was tough.
I think, yeah, so I came out of football was a long time ago now, very different to obviously what I've been up to recently in the last kind of 10 years. But yeah, I came out of my last software company with some resources and basically a desire to build something really important. And I think for me, I was very interested and am very interested in industries where they're capital intensive, where they're complex, where they're long term, because seldom do they ever get built by young entrepreneurs. It's very difficult to get the access to capital, to accrue the skills. And I was in a fairly serendipitous kind of moment where I had part of that. And I think also if you look in the next 30, 40, 50 years about what's going to be important in the future, often these things are large scale infrastructure that needs to get built. And also there are areas of what we're doing that I think is a latent market requirement, latent market desire, where we need to provide the activation energy to kickstart it. Otherwise, it might just not happen. And I think that's really enthusing for me. And yeah, basically, I think that's how we kicked off. And it was useful that I had some resources to start the business because it is capital intensive. It required a lot to get off the floor, basically.
And what was it about synthetic fuel that kind of lured you in, I guess?
Yeah, so I think one of the big problems in the future, or to be honest, one of the big problems now is there's vast amounts of carbon in the sky, carbon dioxide. And I basically looked at it and I don't think there's a particularly good way to drive down the cost of getting it out of the sky. And basically Rivan as a hypothesis is that if you produce a more valuable gross end product, e.g. fuel, that is made from the captured carbon. So basically we take carbon from the air, we mix it with hydrogen and we produce a fuel. If you produce a more valuable gross end product, you can use the profits from that basically to reinvest and drive down the cost of the capturing carbon and basically create this, what you would call a learning rate. And I think that's a really effective mechanism to capture vast amounts of carbon. And yeah, really that's how we started. I think other than synthetic fuels, I don't think there's a lot of good quality mechanisms to drive down the cost of capturing carbon. And yeah, I guess one of the other points is that I think it's also, the whole point is that I have to be very cheap, and therefore we vertically integrate all design, manufacturing and engineering here.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. A lot of the carbon capture companies, I've seen that, I think they sell it for like fizzy water or something.
So yeah. Indeed.
You're trying to like really up the value of the end product, which is really interesting. What stage of development are you at in the process?
Yeah, so we're just over a year old roughly as a company. We now have the largest synthetic fuel plant in the UK. So it's on a military base in Wiltshire, and that's basically to validate that what we say we can actually do and is true. And yeah, we're a team of about 25 very talented engineers that work constantly on trying to build out the system, and we're now trying to scale that up into larger commercial deployments over the next year or two. But yeah, I think basically we're very heavy engineering focused, maybe 95% of all of our resources on that.
And that makes sense. And are you at the point where you feel like you've proved the model, or you've proved the product, and you're ready to take it to those commercial conversations?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, amazing. That's really cool. And why have you decided to build or focus in the UK? So you've got that big plant. You're saying, is it Warwickshire? You said
Wiltshire. Yeah, Wiltshire.
Wiltshire, and then you've got, I think, a big site in Bermondsey as well.
Yeah. So we have our R&D facility, like pseudo manufacturing facility, is in South London in Bermondsey. And I think we started in London. I was based in London. There's a load of talented engineers in London. It's not the greatest place to manufacture based on the cost per square footage, but it's a good place to kickstart things. Whether we'll be here forever, I don't know. But we also need vast amounts of land for our solar, and therefore, obviously, getting out of the city was the only really way to do that. And I think, over time, as we scale manufacturing, we'll kind of expand across the UK, I think.
And how do you see your costs coming down? Like one of the big takeaways I got from the blog post that you wrote was the monumental reduction in price of solar power. Like phenomenal. I had no idea. And is that something that you're trying to push through in what you're building as well? And do you see a future where your own costs reduce drastically?
Yeah, of course. So we counterintuitively, if something drops in price, you have to use more of it to make use of that drop in price. And I don't think this has fully been internalized for solar power. E.g., if it's very cheap, you've got to use loads of it to make sense, basically. If you use less and less, you're not actually benefiting from the falling cost. You might as well stay the same cost. So for us at Rivan, we try and use counterintuitively use loads of very cheap energy and basically convert it into a synthetic fuel at semi-okay efficiency, but really the focus is doing so really cheaply. So we use loads of energy and to vertically integrate all of our engineering to the point where it's an order of magnitude cheaper than what we could buy off the market. And therefore our cost reductions, one, we own the power input. So there's a lot in solar, not all costs for solar are the panels. There's lots of racking, cabling, mounting and things like that, which we own and we engineer away. And then also the system that we build, every nut and bolt is designed and built by us. So there's a lot of area or surface area to reduce the cost over time. So that's our main focus at Rivan, really, to reduce the cost of our fuel. Is really the big driver. Is our system that costs X at the moment has to drive down, and every day we iterate on that basically to drive it down.
And was it a conscious decision that you made that you want to own everything yourself, including the solar power, or did you ever look at trying to, I don't know, buying it off or outsourcing it?
Yeah, we could never do it because of the costs. You incur a parasitic margin every time you purchase from like off the shelf or from a supplier, because they ultimately have to make money. And I think the closer we get to the raw goods, the better. And the lower the kind of idiot index, e.g. like a piece of steel into some sort of component has some sort of multiplier on the cost because of the machining involved. And then we try and reduce that as much as we can. So yeah, it's never an option for us, just purely based on we're in an ultra competitive commodity market, e.g. fuels, that means everything is based on cost, meaning everything has to be looked at with like very kind of a very specific lens to how we can reduce that cost. And for us, the biggest way is to move everything in-house, incur all the complexity now. It's very capital intensive, it's very complex, but is the only way to scale this indefinitely, and also for us to be in control of our own destiny. If we don't own every component, it's very difficult with good confidence to say it will cost X in N time. Whereas I think, the only way to do that is what we're up to.
So own every piece of it. Yeah, it makes sense. And so you've really put your money where your mouth is, right? You've kind of seed funded it yourself for the first year. And then you decided to raise money. I guess, why did you decide to raise money when you did?
I was running out of money. I think there is a little bit of that. So I invested quite a hefty chunk into Rivan. I think it's important. But then also we had reached kind of core validation points that I'd gunned for since the start. So we had product validation that it worked. We had, like in a low fidelity, like small scale, we had team validation that we could hire some unbelievably good engineers. We had distribution in terms of solar planning that was already going through processes. And we also had customer demand. So like those four kind of core tenets were basically the thresholds that I wanted my capital to get us to. And then from there, I think you have access to, you've significantly de-risked, external cash coming in, and then you can also make it work, because we could justify that the company has done real things, and I think that's important if you can get to that stage. And so given that you kind of have ticked your own boxes, you'd built it, you'd seen sort of some demand from customers, how easy was it then for you to go out and fundraise? It's never easy, but I think it was definitely it was more understood because I'd been through it a number of times before with my other companies. I've got some really great supportive investors that have come through multiple businesses with me, which has been great. And then also just by virtue of us being slightly further along in our journey, if we're raising a seed or a pre-seed or whatever you may call it, we're probably slightly more progressed than you would originally think, or normally, especially in hardware, simply because we had a bit of an injection of cash, at the start. So still very tricky, but I think slightly easier because I had some battle scars from before.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And you've got an insane stack of investors who've come on board, right? So the founders of Stripe, 20VC, Plural. What kind of value do they bring as investors?
Oh, I've got to say they bring loads now, haven't I? No, we have a great, and not to mention all the other names that maybe don't get all the headlines, but are super supportive of us. But I think with an ideal investor, you kind of want, they've been there and done that. They've been in the trenches. They know what it's like. They can empathize with how difficult what we're trying to do is. I think that's important. It shows in some of the names you just mentioned. I think they're very strategic. You'd want number two in terms of they can open doors past just capital. And lastly, they've got deep pockets. Ultimately, we're a capital-intensive business. We're going to have to raise vast amounts of money to make this happen and force it into existence. So those three areas I would kind of look as the Goldilocks zone for a great investor. And I think all the names you just mentioned have that. And I have the pleasure of working with all of them fairly closely. So it's been good working with them.
And what about 20VC specifically? Because I think this week they released their video about signing a term sheet in 24 hours. Did you have an experience like that?
Not quite. Maybe we weren't quite as exciting. But Paul, Kieran, and Harry are really great guys. Paul's incredibly supportive of us. He's always there when we need, and he's who I deal with a lot. I think they've been really good to us, and also have been very strategic in a lot of the asks, considering we're probably tangential to the majority of their portfolio in terms of hardware and engineering, as opposed to some of the more AI software-led investments.
Yeah, that makes sense. And building a hardware business, and sort of like a climate tech hardware one, at a time when there's a real hype around AI, did you find fundraising any difficult because of that? Or did people, were people looking for something that wasn't another AI SaaS company?
Yeah, not really. I guess we spoke to investors that were interested in hardware first and foremost, right? You do get very specific, specialized software investors that weren't really a great fit, considering some of my prior investors, maybe. I think we're also part of the zeitgeist at the moment in terms of energy defense and energy security and manufacturing, trying to make a comeback and various elements of that. So I think we aligned with some of those elements that were useful. But no, I never really found that there was much of a pushback on that. I think, to be honest, there's vast amounts of capital for the right things. You just got to go find it. And I think at the moment it's very salient with AI, but that doesn't necessarily represent all the available capital.
Yeah, okay. You sort of mentioned that you're in London, you've got a site in the UK.
Yep.
How do you find it building sort of like hardware in the UK and in Europe? And then also, actually, let's just answer that one first. How do you find having your sites and building in the UK and Europe?
Yeah, I think it's great. We wouldn't do it anywhere else. I think for Rivan specifically, or synthetic fuels specifically, there's low domestic production of fuels. That's why the UK is, it struggles with energy prices. I think it's a great opportunity for us and great opportunity for us to make a real difference, as opposed to somewhere like the Middle East or the States that have vast amounts of natural resource, like we just don't. So I think that in and of itself is good. And then also I think there's this latent, desire from engineers all over the UK to get involved in ambitious, well-funded hardware companies, because I don't think there's that many of them. And we've been lucky enough to accrue some of that talent. We've got an unbelievably dedicated, talented team that does this all the time. So I think that's been good. Because we're maybe slightly different to many other companies in the UK and what we want to achieve and who we have backing us. We have quite a few American investors as well. So yeah, that's been good. But yeah, I mean, I don't really prescribe necessarily to a lot of the conversations around like, oh, you've got to be in X country for this, or you've got to be in San Francisco or whatever. I think often that's just decoys almost. Like if you really need to make something happen, I think you can probably make it happen anywhere.
Yeah, okay. I think we spoke to Martin Mignot at Index Ventures last week, who kind of said a similar thing. If you build with a global mindset, it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah. I think there is difficulties ultimately. You have more access to capital in certain areas, and the market's more primed in certain areas. And therefore, you may gravitate towards them. But like they're often more of a tax than a complete blocker.
Yeah. And do you find yourself, you're building synthetic fuels? Are there rules and regulations? There's a lot of talk about Europe being over-regulated and all the different countries having different rules and different regulations, both in corporations, but also some of the more, like compliancy type stuff. Are there rules and regulations in your business that may make it harder for your business to scale?
There are some very, very niche ones in terms of like fuel qualities and things, but not really. I mean, we operate in a very well-known, well-understood market, e.g. fuels. Biofuels is where we tangentially kind of attach. And this is well known, well understood, and I think the regulatory scrutiny is just quite understood. So I wouldn't say anything that is particularly surprising, considering what we're doing with very large chemical plants that operate autonomously in a field. Like there is legitimate safety concerns and things like that, and regulations that are there specifically to make it safe.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I read your post about kind of like the 1 pound kilogram for H2.
Yep.
I guess my question is, reading that and I guess talking to you, what are the main things that need to happen to make Rivan a success?
How long a list? I think everything distills down into can we make our system at cost and at scale. We may now we can make large scale systems work very well. Can we drive that cost down rapidly at the scaling coefficients that we imagine? And can we scale that up in volume as fast as we need to? They're the two big things. It's all well and good doing 1 or 2 or 3 systems. We need to do tens of thousands. And that is the key element that I work on constantly. And that is the key element that we need to get very right for us to be a very big success.
Interesting. What are your priorities maybe this year, next year? Because you're talking about scaling up rapidly. You need to bring the cost down. What does that look like for the next 6 months?
Just an insane amount of engineering that goes into all the areas that we work on. So to give you an idea of the execution risk that we have at Rivan is that we, in parallel, we're developing, power systems, e.g. like solar and the designs and the power system design around that. A direct air capture system, which is completely novel and has never been created before, an electrolyzer and a reactor and fuel distribution and understanding on that. All of these have like dedicated engineering teams, risks associated. And then within each of those, we have to not just, design it, but we have to then manufacture it, build it, deploy it. So like there's a huge swath of just complexity. I think just going deeper into each of those, insane amount of engineering. The longer we can, or basically, I think Rivan will basically forever be in hardcore engineering mode.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when you lay it out the kind of the different verticals that you're doing on, it sounds incredibly complex. I didn't realize that your direct air capture was entirely novel as well.
Yep.
Are you doing that all in one site?
So the systems, all of these combined, will be in quite a compact kind of skid, basically. But yeah, all this is what's happening on our pilot site currently. And then that is one system. We fully intend on producing tens of thousands of them. So a lot of steel.
Well, that's amazing. Like, I'm conscious we're coming out of time. We're running out of time. The final question, the question that we ask all guests is, what do you think European tech needs to take it to the next level?
I think there's probably capital now being allocated more than ever to quote unquote crazy things. We hopefully are a testament to that. Although Rivan, isn't crazy per se. I think probably a mindset from young entrepreneurs to go after the risk and do something a little different and not maybe follow the crowd into the same thing that everyone else is doing. It's very risky. Your reputation's on the line. It's complex, it's going to be difficult. But ultimately, if you can go after those really tricky, arcane things that people aren't willing to go after, I think that happens a lot elsewhere. It doesn't necessarily happen here because the ambition needs to be super high. I think that would be great generally. A rising tide lifts all ships. I think that's hopefully Rivan can hopefully show a bit of a pathway to that. I hope there's loads more.
Yeah, okay. Get young people taking bigger risks, bigger swings, and building something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and if they fail, they fail. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. Okay, well, look, it's been amazing to have you, Harvey. I think what you're building at Rivan is absolutely amazing. It could be like a really, really cool generational company. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Seb. Yeah, cool.